So if you've just arrived, a very warm welcome to you. Welcome to the Buddhist Society. My name's Richard, and I'm taking this basic meditation class this evening. We were just sitting for a few minutes to allow everyone to log on and to arrive. And I think probably most people have managed to do that now. So in this session this evening, which will last roughly an hour and a half till about 8 o'clock, we're going to sit for a while and I'll offer some basic instruction, and there'll be a time for some questions towards the end. Basic meditation. Well, one of the things we can do to start with is we can establish our posture. And many of you will be familiar with that. You need a really stable position. So if you're sitting on a chair, a Western chair, just plant the soles of your feet firmly on the ground, on the floor, so that you feel stable and grounded. And if you're sitting cross-legged on the floor, which is also perfectly useful and valuable posture, just see if you can find a really stable, comfortable position and just connect with the points of contact with the floor that you have, your ankles, your shins and knees. And just for a moment, in whatever position you're sitting, just close your eyes and just get a sense of being really supported by the floor. Just connected to the floor. We call this grounding. So feel grounded. So allow your body weight just to sink into the floor so that you feel the support. And in doing that, allow your attention to drift downwards. So the invitation here is to feel grounded, connected with the floor, and just begin by allowing your attention, where you're placing your attention, just to drift down. And if you've just joined us, we're just establishing our basic meditation posture. The other important part of the posture to mention is just have an upright back. Not rigidly straight, but reasonably upright. So we have a lot of energy movements up and down the spine, and to have a reasonably straight back, this can facilitate those movements. It's fine if you're sitting in a chair to feel a bit of support from the back of the chair. But perhaps it's a good idea not to slouch too much into the back of a chair. So support some of your own body weight with your own body. And I'm going to just take you through a basic body scan. So if you allow your attention to go up to the top of your head, the crown of your head, and just lengthen a fraction towards the sky so that your head and your neck is aligned with your spine, and your spine is aligned with your hips and pelvis. So everything is basically in a nice upright column. And the other very important invitation to include at this point is see if you can just relax into that posture. So this grounded, stable, but upright posture. Just add some relaxation into it. And indeed, let me extend that invitation to relax to just the rest of you. No one's going to ask you to do anything difficult in this session. No one's going to ask you to do anything that's beyond your scope. And this is some time where you don't actually have to worry about all your everyday concerns. You can put those to one side. So the invitation is to relax. And then just feel the crown of your head. And with all these invitations, the point is to actually feel, not to think about or imagine, but to really make a feeling connection. What does it sense? What's the sense of it like? What's the sensory connection with it? So you don't have to answer any of these questions verbally. It's just a question of feeling your way. So now allow your attention to drop to include the whole of your head and your neck, and your ears and the back of your head, the front of your head, the face. Just feel the whole of your head. Feel it resting on your neck and shoulders. And then allow your attention to drift downwards again into your neck and shoulder area. Just feel what's going on there. What's that like? Are you carrying any tension there? And the invitation is just to feel, to notice, and to relax. And from your neck and shoulder area, again, the invitation is to drop your attention downwards into the mid-chest area. So, middle of your chest, upper back. Just notice what's going on there. At this point in your body, you might notice some movement caused by the breath. And just notice that. And again, the invitation is really feel it rather than think about it or imagine it. So in the upper chest area, the upper back, and we're just noticing what's going on there, perhaps just feeling some movement caused by our breath. And then the invitation now is to drop your attention downwards again, perhaps into the mid chest area in the middle of your back. And just notice what's going on there. Just feel, really feel. We often have some tension around the solar plexus area. And this is the area we're in now, so we can just feel what's going on there. And then I invite you to drop your attention downwards again into the lower torso area. That's your stomach and your lower back. And just feel what's going on there. You might notice some digestive rumbles or some movement caused by your digestive tract. So just notice what's going on there. Again, really feel rather than thinking about or imagining. And then I invite you to drop your attention downwards again to your pelvic area. Just feel your sitting bones on the chair or the cushion. Feel the way that they're supporting the weight of your torso. Feel the contact with the chair or the cushion. And then I invite you just to take in your shoulders and your arms and your hands. Just notice the way you're holding your hands. Have you got them comfortably on your lap or on your thighs, upturned or downturned? Just find a position where they're comfortable and you don't have to worry about what to do with them. And then drop your attention down your upper legs, taking in the thighs at the front and your hamstrings at the back, feeling any contact with the chair or the cushion. Just notice what's going on there. And then I invite you just to notice your knees. Just sense what's going on there. And then I invite you to drop your attention downwards, down your lower legs, the calves at the back, and the shins at the front. Move downwards until you get to your ankles and the soles of your feet. And when you get down to the soles of your feet or the points of contact with the floor, just again feel grounded and connected and supported by the floor. And now I invite you just to take in the whole of your body, from the soles of your feet to the crown of your head, just feeling the whole column, the whole mass of your body. Feel the clothes on your skin surface and the air on your hands and your face. So just feel the boundaries of that physical body. Feel the contact with the chair, the cushion. And just notice where you end and where the world begins. So please feel free to stretch and move and perhaps take a sip of water. So if you've just joined us, that was a body scan, and if you've sat through the whole 23 or so minutes of it, well done. You can congratulate yourself. That was quite a long sit. One of the questions that I get asked in some of these classes is, why do the body scan? Why do so many, certainly in the Buddhist world, why do so many basic meditation practices start with some connection with the body? And you'll find that both my colleagues in this class will begin the class with a body scan of some description. And the answer to that question is, well, it's manifold, but I think the questioner who asked it was saying, well, I really get on much better with following the breath or doing more different types of practice. Why the body scan? I'm quite bored with the body scan. And I guess the answer to the question is, it's a bit like sharpening your tools if you're a craftsman. So if you're a carpenter, before you begin work on any piece of work, any piece of wood, you'll lay out your tools before you and you'll check that they're all in good working order. You'll sharpen the instruments to make sure that they will do the job that they're intended for. And I guess the body scan's a bit like that. We're basically honing our attention skills before we. It is basic practice, and we're just checking that our attention is following our instructions. So you'll notice that in one of my invitations that I offered on several occasions, it was not to think about or imagine, but to really feel. So this is pointing to where to direct our attention. It's so easy in a body scan if someone says, place your attention on the back of your head. It's actually have an image at the back of your head in your mind. And or to start thinking about, is my hair okay at the back of my head, or some such worry. Whereas the point is to actually place your attention and to feel. It's the same with the soles of one's feet. It's a feeling connection that is being encouraged and pointed to here. And this is really sharpening our attention skills. And we need to do this before we move into any other aspect of meditation. Attention is really a critical part of the practice. So in the next practice we will follow, it's very much the same instruction, but we're going to be using the breath. Now, in basic meditation, we often offer two invitations. One is to notice what's going on, and the other is simply to let go of what's going on. And they sound terribly simple to do, but as many of you who've been to this class before and who are experienced meditators will testify, the simple instructions can be actually quite a task to follow. And of course, the invitation is also not to worry about when you drift off and you stop noticing. It's simply part of the nature of the mind. You haven't made a mistake. You haven't got it wrong. It doesn't mean you're not meditating. This is part of the practice. That's why we call it practice. It's a training. It's a training of just learning to place our attention and replace it again. So we're learning a number of things in this practice. So noticing and letting go, recognizing what's going on while it's going on. In a way, that's almost a definition of mindfulness. Recognizing what's going on while it's going on. And there's a really important point in doing that. The usual instruction is just to notice. And sometimes I try to sort of explain that a bit by saying recognize. And the clue's in the word recognize. To cognize, Latin for to know, to re-know something. So by noticing what's going on while it's going on, you're reframing it, you're re-noticing it, you're knowing it in a slightly different way. And it may only be a slightly different way, but that slight difference is critical to actually shifting your perspective. It's the little chink in the armor of our illusory self, to re-know. So we're going to do a bit of that sort of practice now, and then I'll talk some more after we've done some practice. So the invitation here, we're going to go back into the body. We're going to reconnect with our feet and our sitting bones and our back. And then we're going to start using the breath as a vehicle of meditation. And when I say vehicle, it's a technical word. Some people call it an object of meditation. Others call it a vehicle. It's just a means of bringing our attention home, bringing ourselves into contact with our minds. And let's actually, I'll talk you through it as we do it. So let's go back into our meditation posture. So an upright posture, relaxed. Just connect with your feet on the ground or your ankles and shins if you're sitting on the floor. Just take a moment or two to settle. Do get comfortable. Relax. And then just connect with your spine. Just check that it's nice and upright and relaxed at the same time. Find a nice, comfortable, neutral position for your hands in your lap or on your thighs, upturned or downturned. Just something that feels natural, where you don't have to worry about what to do with them. And then I invite you just to take one or two just deep in and out breaths, just to know what we're dealing with. So in, out, one, in, out, two. And then leave the breath alone. Just breathe naturally and normally. And then the invitation now is just to notice the breath. So if I can make that really specific, notice movement in the body caused by the breath. So wherever it's easiest for you to pick up that connection, see if you can move to that area with your attention. Now notice what's going on. So the invitation is to pick up the movement caused by the breath. And then when your mind wanders, which it will, just notice that, recognize it. And just gently bring your attention back to the movement caused by the breath. So keep it relaxed, keep it gentle. If you find your mind wandering, that's fine. You haven't made a mistake. Just notice that. And just gently, compassionately, with kindness, just refocus your attention on the breath, on the movement caused by the breath. You might notice how calming and soothing the breath can be. So we're just noticing what's going on and noticing the breath. We're not trying to eliminate thought, we're just noticing when thoughts arise. See if you can keep it kind towards yourself. See if you can move into a really compassionate space towards yourself. If thoughts arise, if your attention drifts, you haven't made a mistake. This is just the nature of the mind. Keep it relaxed, keep it kind. So if you're getting lost, just reconnect with your body and then come back to the breath. And just reconnect and continue just noticing, recognizing what's going on. Now into your practice, I invite you to see if you can weave in some kindness to yourself. So every time you recognize that you've drifted, see if you can respond with some sort of compassion and kindness, knowing that you haven't made a mistake. This is just the nature of the mind, and you're doing absolutely fine. Just some basic kindness for yourself. So please stretch, relax, take a sip of water, get yourself comfortable. So well done, everyone. That's 2 substantial periods of meditation we've done already this evening. So I just thought I'd offer you some reflections on the practice so far. So we've done a basic body scan, and we've done a period of mindfulness of breathing. Now, in meditation practice, those are 2 of the essential tools of practice. The body scan, as I was saying earlier, is a way of just honing our attention, bringing our connection into the body. So many of us spend so much of our lives in our heads. We think ever such a lot. Certainly in Western culture we do. And I think they attached some electrodes to some people's brains in America, and they found that the average number of thoughts per day was something like 50,000. It's a hell of a lot of thinking. So we have busy minds, and if you read the Buddhist suttas, you'll find that even in those days, the Buddha was talking about the busy mind, the monkey mind, and it's a very apt description of the way that our attention just jumps from one thing to another. And certainly with the internet age and the ability to turn pages on our internet connections very quickly, it's got even worse. Our attention spans are quite short. So the body scan is really one way of just settling that down a bit, just quietening the busyness down. We're not eliminating thought, but we're just learning to connect with the body, because when you think about it, once your attention is located in the body, say, let's take, for example, the soles of your feet, where we started this evening. If your attention is really feeling the soles of your feet, it's feeling them right now in this moment. It's not like the next in the future or in the past. It's right now in the moment. So it's one way of bringing your attention into the present moment, which is a very important part of meditation. And the same true for any other part of the body. That's why the body is so important as a way in with meditation. And if you think about it with the breath, where we were in the second practice we did, just following the breath, the mindfulness of breathing, just that basic rhythm, the sensation of the movement of the breath. If you're actually connected with that feeling of the breath, it's right now. It's not the breath a minute ago or the next breath that's coming. It's this breath right now. And that locates your attention quite clearly in the present moment. And that's a really important aspect to basic meditation practice. Now, some of you that may have seen the Buddhist Society website earlier in the week may have noticed that I entitled this evening's session as Losing One's Way and Then Finding It. I just wanted to look a little bit about this notion of losing one's way in meditation. There's some rather obvious ways that we can get lost in meditation. And of course, here we're talking about distractions, things that take us away from being present with ourselves and our minds. Now, the very obvious one is something that happens outside of us, an external noise, somebody in the next room or in the corridor or in the street outside. We hear a noise, and immediately our attention is drawn outwards and away from where we were. And that's one fairly obvious example of a distraction. And of course, it's quite natural to be distracted by a sound that takes us away, that takes our attention away from being on the breath or in a different part of our body. That's quite natural and normal. There's nothing wrong with that. We haven't got it wrong. Think about it. Our attention has been built up over many, many years, thousands of years of evolution, and we're designed to actually attend to what is an immediate presence for us in our auditory sphere. So we hear a noise, and of course our attention goes there, because at one point in our history, our survival may have depended on it. We hear a rustle in the bushes, we spin around to see if there's a big cat about to jump out and eat us. So we've survived because our attention is acutely attuned to what's going on around us. Now, meditation isn't going against that. We're just noticing when our attention is drawn outside. So here, say here, where I am in my room right now, I've got quite a busy road right outside. It's not a terribly peaceful place to be meditating. So if I hear, say, the sound of a vehicle outside, my mind can immediately going, is that a car? Is it a bus? Is it a lorry? What sort of vehicle is it? And before I know it, I'm thinking, well, it's a bus, but how many people are on the bus? Is it busy? Etc., etc. So I go off on a whole chain of thoughts set in motion by the sound in the street. That's an example of how we can get just taken out of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. The point with meditation is just to notice it. This is it. Recognize it. Okay, that's a sound. I notice it, and I come back. I come back to the breath. I don't have to get into a whole load of thought trees, if you like, sort of a spiral of thought about what the sound was, what it meant, is it a threat to me, how many people were on the bus, etc., etc. I can just let it go. It's just a sound, that's all. It's not threatening me. It's not disturbing my meditation unless I let it, and I can come back to my breath. So that's an example of noticing and letting go, coming back home to the present moment. So that's a fairly obvious example of an external distraction. That's one of the ways we lose ourselves in meditation. Now, please don't misunderstand me. There is nothing wrong with that. This is not about concentrating rigidly on the breath. What we're doing here is we're using the breath as an anchor for our attention. It's just a place we return to, a reconnection point, if you like. We're not locked onto the breath as though it was a rigid, concentrated activity. I think both Colin and Ajahn Subhadho you'll hear them say, this is not a concentration practice. This isn't about concentrating. The invitation for your attention is to keep it light, gentle. So you're just lightly noticing what's going on. But the key part is just to be able just to relinquish the temptation to go off onto a whole string of thoughts about what is going on. So that's a very obvious example of what external sounds can do to us and how they can take us away from, they can make us lose ourselves, but only if we allow them to. The more difficult way that we get lost is the internal drift. Now, I'm sure you know this one. If you sit in meditation, is you're sitting there, you're quite calm, you're settled, you're noticing the breath, And before you know it, you're off on your summer holidays next year somewhere, and you're on a wonderful beach in the sunshine in the Mediterranean or whatever. And before you know it, you're deciding what drinks you're going to have, and whether to get the suntan cream out, or etc. etc. This is what I call the internal drift. And some of these thoughts are very seductive. I mean, that's the whole point about distractions, is that they're seductive. There's a sort of like a beckoning, or they can be disturbing thoughts. They can be difficult memories that we can't let go of, that keep repeating themselves, and those are quite difficult as well. But the instruction in the Buddhist world, anyway, with both those types of internal distractions, internal drifts, the instruction is the same. It's to notice. And this is the key. This is why the training with the body scan to begin with is so crucial, because we're learning just to notice what's going on. And noticing, once we've noticed, then we can choose to relinquish the thought. So if we haven't noticed that we're off on our summer holidays on the beach, deciding what drinks to have, if we haven't noticed that, we can just stay there for the rest of the session. And it can be very pleasant sometimes. But if it's the other type of distraction, if it's a disturbing thought, something that's happened to us in the past that we haven't processed fully, and that can come back, and that's more difficult, and that's not so easy to be with. But nevertheless, they can be equally as compelling. But the instruction, the invitation in both cases is to notice. And this is why I used the word earlier this evening, is to recognize, recognize, re-know. Because in knowing, I'm off on my summer holidays, or I'm off in a difficult time many years ago, and where I am right now is here in this room on my meditation cushion. Just knowing that, knowing what's going on while it's going on, helps us to reframe it. We put it into a slightly different perspective. And that's all we need to disconnect. That's all we need. Now, it may come back. There's no guarantee it won't. But we have the anchor of our breath to return to. This is a safe haven. The breath is neutral. The breath is calming. The breath is soothing. The breath carries our consciousness. It's an anchor for us. At all times of our life, we can always reconnect with our breath. And on the cushion in meditation, we can learn to do this so that in the rest of our life, when things are getting stressful, we can just breathe and know that we're breathing. I always remember Ajahn Sabado. He emphasizes this point that there's no real distinction between formal sitting meditation and our everyday life. It's if we can carry through that sense, that presence from the cushion into our everyday life, that's the point of the training. And working with the breath is one way of actually progressing that training. So just knowing it's this breath now. So whatever situation you're in, just that capacity to just turn to your breath, breathe, and know that you're breathing. It's a real resource in difficult times. Just to place all of this in some sort of context in Buddhist practice, what we're doing in this class is we're giving you the beginnings of Vipassana practice. So that's a Pali word which roughly translates as insight. So it basically means deeply looking into. So Vipassana means deeply looking into. And what are we deeply looking into? It's the fundamental nature of our experience. And this is the point of the practice. This is the real bit that can free us, can take us towards liberation. Let me just flesh that out a bit for you. By learning to be in the present moment and to notice, to recognize what's going on, one of the things we start to know as we practice more often is that every experience we have, whether it's in meditation or in everyday life, it has a beginning, it has a life, and it has a fading away. It arises, it establishes itself, and it fades away. It turns, and it diminishes, it fades away, it changes. So with our breath, we notice there's an arising of the in-breath, there's a falling away of the in-breath, there's a turning point, and there's the out-breath. And so too, with every experience in life, things arise, they fall away. So we're beginning to observe change on a moment-to-moment basis. When we may know at a head level, an intellectual level, everything changes. Everything is impermanent. But when we really deeply connect with it in our meditation practice, we begin to know it at a different level. We really know it. And this is the point of insight practice, is to begin to really know the nature of change and how it permeates every aspect of our existence. And there can be a great freedom in knowing that. We were stuck with difficult things the whole of our life. It would be grim. Just one or two common misconceptions with meditation. And many of you that have come to this class over the years will not be party to these misconceptions. But often people come to meditation practice with some sort of subtle agenda that they're going to be completely still in their minds, they're going to be completely peaceful in their minds, they're going to be completely free of thought. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, and that's not the point anyway. That's not where we're aiming. We're not aiming to be thought-free and completely still and completely peaceful. What we are learning is that actually there is an inner space where we can notice movement, lack of peace, thoughts, and we can be at home whilst those are going on. We can be at peace with ourselves whilst those are going on. And of course, the whole thrust of this practice is about letting go, not attaching to anything that arises. Easy to say, and I will acknowledge that it's really difficult to do. That's why it's called the practice. It's a training. And yeah, just that. Some of the other things that we're learning in these, in both these practices, and indeed anything else that you do in Vipassana training, you're learning patience, you're learning resilience, you're just practicing this way of being with yourself. where you don't get attached to difficult stuff and seductive stuff. And there's such freedom in that. It's just learning that we don't have to buy in to a lot of our thoughts. We can notice that they always change. Our moods change, they come and they go. And yes, sometimes they can be really unsettling and disturbing. But we can notice them. We can recognize what we're in when we're in it. And that's called mindfulness. And that's part of the path towards freedom. Does anyone have any questions at this point? You're welcome to unmute yourself or ask them through the chat. If not, I've got one or two questions that people have asked me, but I'll just give you some space now, see if anyone wants to ask any questions. It can be about anything to do with meditation. I don't claim to be able to answer everything. If I can't answer it, I'll refer them to Colin next week. Or to Ajahn Subado in a few weeks' time. I'll tell you one question that has come up a number of times in these sessions is someone asked, I'm always thinking, I can't stop thinking. Can you help me? What am I doing wrong? And of course, I think I've mentioned that earlier in this session is that the point of the practice is not to stop thinking. I remember Ajahn Amaro at Amaravati, he said, well, if the point of meditation practice was to stop thinking, the Buddha would have come along with some herb or some drug like thorazine or something like that just blocks out thought. Or the other great teacher in the Theravadan world was Ajahn Chah, who used to say, well, if you look at the water buffalo, of which in Thailand there were a lot, just chewing the cud, standing in the meadows, doing nothing in particular. He said, well, they're a good example of someone not thinking. But the point of we're humans, we think. The point of the practice is not to stop thinking. It's to recognize what we're in when we're in it. And that's different. Now, you may find over time that with your practice that the pace of thoughts, the busyness of the mind does settle, it does diminish. You're not having, 1,000 thoughts every 5 minutes. You're maybe having 200. Well, that's quite a reduction. And that capacity just to notice, and then that gives you the choice to not to attach, to let go. But the noticing to begin with, that's the point. That's because that's the place where you have freedom. You have freedom to let it go. You don't have to buy into all of your thoughts. Yeah, some thoughts are very important. Some emotions are important. They're very they're telling us something. We shouldn't ignore them. But we don't have to buy in hook, line, and sinker to the whole embodiment of those emotions. We can know, oh, I'm feeling a bit down today, without actually sinking into the depths of despondency. And we can know it's just today. Okay, I've got a question. Outside of the meditation session, Which is your preferred way of reconnecting with the present and notice? Breath or part of the body? Or does it depend on the situation? I often forget to do this. Well, thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I forget to do it as well. My own preferred way, and this will be a very individual thing for all of you. So you have to find what works for you, basically, here. My preferred way is the breath. If I'm in a stressful meeting or in a difficult encounter with someone, if I can just, for a moment, just breathe, know that I'm breathing, that seems to work for me. And it's a training. As the questioner said, it's something that it's very easy in the heat of the moment to forget to do. And that's a training, that's a practice in itself. But when one has established a certain degree of just capacity to be present, whatever's going on, there's such freedom in that. There is such freedom. And it may not be the breath for many of you. You have to find what works for you. And here's another important principle at work in teaching meditation and for people attending meditation classes. You're being offered choices here. Many things will work very well for some people, but not for you. And you have to find what fits with your own individual requirements. And just to give you an example of that, in the second practice we did when I was inviting you to connect with your breath, the movement caused by your breath. Now, traditionally, they will offer you options of either the chest area, the abdomen, or the rim of the nostrils. And you can choose, or the whole column of the breath. Choose what works for you. And that's a very individual thing. So the question is, where do you most easily connect with the breath or that part of the body that actually takes you into the present moment? It may be the soles of your feet, something like that. I knew someone that worked with the heartbeat. Quite difficult to pick up for many people, but it seemed to work for this individual. So that's the answer to the question is, find what works for you. Experiment a bit with that as well. If you can find some situations that are not highly charged, but just low charge, just slightly stressful, then just see what works in those situations. Then if you practice with that, when you get a very heavily charged situation, you may find that you have this resource at your fingertips. And it takes practice. It's a great question. And I think the other thing I would say about it is this is the way to freedom. To actually have that capacity to not to react to our experiences, whatever they are, but to be able to actually connect with the present, part of our body that takes us into the present moment. Then we have choice. Then we can respond rather than react. Wow, that is a real resource. Thank you for the question. I think the other thing, just the last thing I would say, just before we close, because it's coming up to 8 o'clock, the last little bit I would say is this is a long-term practice. This is something that is designed to cultivate patience. And patience is such an asset. It's such a resource. So whatever life experience is being thrown in our direction, whatever it is, just that inner capacity just to be patiently mindful of how we are with it and how we can respond rather than react to it. That is a training in patience, and it just gives us such freedom. So I've talked quite a bit. There's no more questions. What I suggest we do, just for these last couple of minutes, let's just sit quietly, and I'll finish with the closing homage in a couple of minutes. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teachings so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dharma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. So thank you all very much for coming and forming this online Sangha. You are the Sangha that have practiced well. So thank you all very much for attending. Colin will be here next week, and I wish you well. Thank you.